Welcome back to Beernid40K. The Cult Codex is all over online as people with pre-release copies of the book have gotten the green light to do their reviews. There are some big changes to how we thought things were going to work according to teases from the official Warhammer Community page, and people have a lot of questions right now. In fact, some people are a little angry. So I wanted to take a second, let you know what I know at this point in time. Take it from there and just say what I think about some of the weirder choices made by GW in this codex, and in the process, talk a bit about what I see for the future of the cult. So rend that like button, roll a 6, get that AP-4, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and with that out of the way, let's take a look at the news for Genestealer Cults in this 8th edition codex. So first off, you guys know I'm a cult fanboy, so there is a bit of salt in this, but just know this is my faction. We're cultists for life here on Beernid40K. It's just that some of these new rules have had me see moments of saltiness, and the community in general has experienced this. I think overall the cults are going to be more flavorful than before, and we have a lot more options than just playing ambush stealers, which is a very good thing. Right now, most playstyles look semi-viable, even things like shooty cults, which was not really a thing before now, in my opinion. However, we do have some things that will be a bit challenging to find workarounds for from what I can see. GW has made some extremely odd choices in this codex and applied some strange things to us that don't make a lot of sense to a lot of cult players out there. Here's an example. Astra Militarum detachments taken with cults now only grant 50% of the command points normally given for the detachment, rounding up. This is supposed to be because of the fluff that it's harder for cults to access military grade weaponry or whatever, which, yeah, sure, fine. I'm really not a fan of this. I don't like it. It would be fine in something like, say, narrative play, but I don't like it in matched play. I think it discourages players from bringing larger detachments of guard, and it was done in a way contrary to the fluff point GW says they were trying to make. As I see this, 50% of CP rounding up is actually penalizing you for things like troops and HQs, not crazy armor, because 50% of 1 CP rounding up is still 1 CP. So Outrider detachments, Spearhead detachments, Air Wing detachments that are full of these hard to get pieces of equipment, they fall through this little bit of logic here. It's just as easy as before to bring those vehicles, and it's things like troops and HQs that end up affected by this if you instead decided to bring a battalion or something, which these in the fluff would actually be the easiest thing to infiltrate. You're talking troops, you're talking the command structure. This is what we go for. So overall, I do think this is a bit of a fail, both in terms of fluff and in terms of crunch. But hey, if GW is trying to make a move to limit soup, I don't think they are, but if they're trying to limit soup and push monofaction builds a bit more, I don't think that's a bad thing. I just don't think that's what they're trying to do, because soup is encouraged in every other case, and if that's the case, let's imagine GW decides tomorrow, hey, we're done with soup, let's do this Codex Cult book because they were kind of taking advantage of that. Why do they start here at the end of 8th, basically, the end of the Codex release cycle, with a faction that has struggled in competition? If they don't want soup, why write this into our Codex and not just make a sweeping FAQ later on instead, where this applies to all factions and not just ours? I mean, you could easily fluff this into a lot of places. Like imagine, oh, Space Wolves, they're hard to get along with and talk to people like jerks. So Imperial Knight detachments only grant 50% of CP for the detachments as normal. But no, fluff considerations get tossed out the window with allied detachments in any other case. But this is the rule. We have to live with it, and what this means is that I think we might see a decrease in guard allied in with cults, especially things like the battalion detachments, and you're going to see more of the spearheads and things like that. Only time will tell, though, because a lot of people basically what they were bringing isn't going to be affected by this. This doesn't affect the main ITC list that has been floating around before this codex, since the main ITC list was not bringing guard along with it. But it will be of interest to some of you, so I thought I should mention it, because some of you guys are asking, hey, I have 1,000 points of guard that I take with my cults. What now? And you do have a point. Overall, I just think this is a very strange choice after over a year of wondering, are cults going to get unique orders or something like that? Well, instead of giving us what we were waiting for, GW decided no orders. Brood Brothers also don't get buffs from being taken in a cult detachment, so no 6-up invuln or anything like that from the gene sects on top. we get nerfed attachments for them because of fluff, yet the fluff given as the reason isn't really reflected. It's just strange, and I do see where you guys are coming from. On an unrelated but semi-related note, there is some good news. We are officially getting Aberrants in the Abominant HQ in separate boxed releases. These come out for pre-order next week, along with the Biophagus and the Achilles Ridge Runner. This is good because Aberrants and Abominants got a lot of love in this codex, and they will be a big part of many competitive list attempts, in my opinion. So if you're like me, I tried to order my Biophagus online and was confused that this and things like the Ridge Runner, they weren't on GW's website, but now it makes sense. It's all going to be okay, guys. They're doing this release in kind of 2 waves. They didn't tell us they were going to do this, but it's this week's pre-orders and next week's pre-orders. So if you wanted a Biophagus or a Ridge Runner, something like that, you couldn't find them, don't worry. They will be up for order next week. So like I said, Abby's coming. It's good because there's a lot of love for them in this codex. However, here's where I encountered another bit of salt myself. Our old bread and butter unit, the Genestealers, do not get the benefit of the new Gene Sect buffs, and this is really important to our lists. So imagine you take Genestealers in the Tyranid decks, you take a High Fleet Adaptation, Kraken, Jormungandr, something like that, and that buff is applied army-wide. It makes everything better. That doesn't happen for us. We do get Gene Sects, but they do not affect things like our Patriarch and our Pure Strain Genestealers. This is a bit confusing to me because the Tyranid Codex has cheaper Stealers. Cheaper Stealers you can take as troops. Their Stealers can take advantage of High Fleet buffs all day, and they have access to things like Toxin Sacs and Acid Maws, but our more expensive Stealers that take up an elite slot, not a troop slot, they don't have this, and they cannot benefit from things like the +1 to invulns, the +1 to strength, anything that the new Gene Sect choices provide. Now, I've seen people online saying, yeah, but Genestealers taking the buffs from the NID Codex and not Cult is fluffy. I don't agree with that. I don't think that Genestealers should be stronger because they're with the Tyranids. This is Codex Genestealer Cults. As you could probably tell in my last video, I immediately assumed that Stealers would have these applied. In fact, most people did. And even some people doing Codex reviews with pre-release copies and have been play testing this didn't seem to notice this. Now, recently, I talked about how cool it would be to have Stealers with a 4-up invuln and Swift and Deadly stacked on top of that, or at Strength 5 from the Twisted Helix trait. But this is not how it's going to work. Things like Aberrants, Adeline Jackals, Metamorphs, Acolytes, all of these things, all the other stuff is buffed by the Gene Sects, but not the Stealers, and not things like your vehicles. So I wanted to point that out, make a correction from my last video, and put that out there because it's something people are missing, and when they do find it, people are getting salty about it. Stealers, just the fact of the matter is, yes, the rumor is true. Stealers do not get buffs to strength. They don't get the invuln buffs. They don't get the buffs to charges, any of the other stuff that the Gene Sects provide. So what I think this means is you really are going to be incentivized in the new 8th edition Genestealer Cults to take other things, if I'm honest. Especially, yes, even shooting. We have a stratagem to get 3 inches away on ambush, so instead of dropping Stealers or Aberrants and hoping for a great charge, things like your Acolytes, they can spam Hand Flamers and be buffed to Strength 5 in melee with Twisted Helix. So you can use the perfect ambush stratagem, put these guys 3 inches away, flame a unit. I think we're going to start to see more and more of this over things like the Stealer or Abbey Bombs quite a bit, because with the change to ambush giving a flat 9-inch infiltration from turn 2, and the only real buffs for a melee strike being a couple of +1s to charge that you can stack on there, I really don't like the Stealer Bomb as much as before, or just relying on a massive dedicated CC blob at all, if I'm honest. It's just too risky to have 250 to 300 points off the board until turn 2 at the earliest, only to fail that charge with it after they ambush, and they're just stuck out in the open getting shot up until you can try again for another charge turn 3. So your first wave of true ambushers really needs some range, and they need to be able to take chafe out of the way, clear the way for other bigger things if you are bringing a melee blob. So, yeah, you need some range on your Cult Ambush, I think now. And with Acolytes having the ability to take Hand Flamers, demo charges, and fight in later turns because you can stack them to Strength 5 with the Twisted Helix stratagem, this is starting to push out things like the Genestealers. So GSC, it's going to require a new playstyle, and the army is going to look very different than before. There are just rules everywhere that are forcing things into different kind of avenues. Another interesting choice that GW made that I really think changes the cults is it looks like if you take a patriarch in your list, it has to be your warlord. This is another thing I was not a fan of on first glance, because patriarchs, I mean, let's face it, old Pat, he wants to be thrown around. And I would like to have had the option to include him, but also have, say, an Abominant as my warlord for the buffs or something else, just that versatility, the options. However, this does fit the fluff. He is the biggest, baddest Genestealer. He's the father of the cult. I understand they're saying, yes, it fits the narrative, and it does. I understand why GW did this. My problem is just that I think we have a lot of things to deal with already that in combination here with this make things like this unnecessarily restrictive in competition. Because there's a new rule for cults, and only cults, that says only one of a certain character can be taken in a single detachment. Let me say that again. New rule. Only one of each character can be taken in any single detachment. So no more Supreme Command detachment with 3 Maguses or something like that, because you can only have 1 Magus in that Supreme Command detachment. 1 Patriarch per detachment, 1 Abominant per detachment, and so on. So combined with the rule also saying things like, hey, Patriarch, if you take it, it must be your warlord. Yeah, that would have been great in narrative play, but I'm not thrilled about it in tournament situations where I want total flexibility. We have a lot of things working against us. We're an Alpha Strike faction stuck in our deployment zone until turn 2. We have the rule of 3 that came into 8th a while back in a big FAQ, so we're unable to spam as it is, and we can now only take 1 copy of a character per detachment, and are also forced to take the Patriarch as warlord if we include one. Holy crap. That is a lot of checks and balances on this codex. There seems to be a lot of restrictions focused on, say, 1 unit like the Steelers, yet the Abominant can run around at something crazy like Strength 22 from different buffs and faction synergies all over, taking him even further. We have Acolytes that got a point reduction and can be buffed with Gene-Sec traits, and they can take Hand Flamers and shoot on Cult Ambush. On and on and on it goes. I think this is edging out some of the cult mainstays like the Patriarch and Steelers significantly, because now you're almost crazy if you do take things like them, or the Brood Brothers that punish you for doing so with CP, or with no real buffs to them. They can't use the Gene-Sec buffs even when taken in the same detachment. So all of that is going on, while other similar units are clearly significantly better. So now our choices are changing. Of course, every codex has clear winners and losers, but it's not usually the titular units. I mean, imagine if Death Guard suddenly had new models come out and that codex punished you for using Plague Marines. It's like that. But with all of that said, I do still think we have a good codex from what I've seen. I do still think we will maintain a unique identity and playstyle. In fact, I think that that's going to be better than ever before. And I do still think that there are going to be ways to hold our own. A longtime subscriber put it very succinctly, very well in a comment. He put it perfectly. He basically said, look, if you watch my last Tactica for the Colts in 8th, came out almost a year ago now, it was Codex Steeler Bomb. And he's exactly right. There wasn't any versatility there. This was what we took in a take-all-comers list. So even though it's tempting for me to be just cynical and say, oh, GW just wants to sell aberrants and abominants and all the new stuff, the fact is, even if this is true, they have still given us things to work with in this codex, and they've made the cults look very different on the table to how they looked in the beginning of 8th edition. The variety is definitely increased. Before, nobody was running aberrants, everybody was running Steelers. Now the opposite is going to be true. We also have 3 dedicated assassins through the Locust, the Sanctus, the Kellermorph, which are amazing models and have really good rules. We have 3 pages of stratagems now. We have a lot of relics now, so things will be different, but I think it can work. And I suppose I just need to take a hint from my faction and go back to the shadows, be quiet, and adapt with the times. There are some things I don't like, but it's not all salt that's here. The fear here is that we have a history of struggling in competition. So strange rules that only we have to abide by ticked the nerd anger box, GW, if you're listening. We've waited a long time for the Codex. We had a lot of hopes for things like the Brood Brothers, and there are things that just don't make sense, even if some Dark Eldar player or non-GSC playtester says it does. However, like I said, I do think this can work. If you've played cults, if you're a dedicated cultist, don't give up hope. To be honest, I think Stealer Bomb has been dead a long time already. That FAQ that started to introduce things like power level started getting to us, and then the one after that that said, hey, you're not leaving your deployment zone till turn 2, that was it. So current lists aren't really using that anyway. Current lists doing well in ITC involved taking a few Magus, which that's going to change because that was done in a single detachment. Now you're going to need to split that up. You can still do it. It's just going to need to be changed to how you were doing it. So it had that couple of Maguses, a few squads of Abbeys with picks, 2 Abominants, which again are going to now need to be split into multiple detachments, and it took a Kraken detachment using Neurothropes and Rippers with a single squad of Stealers starting on the table. That's what was working. Maguses, a squad of Abbeys with picks, 2 squads of Abbeys with picks, the Abominants, Kraken detachment with some Psychic and Objective holding. Stealer Bomb, it was expensive. It was squishy. It had an element of randomness to it, and then it got pushed to turn 2. So we needed other options, and I'm glad that we have them, even if it's coming along with some other strangeness. Personally, I think I'm going to try monocults for a bit. I'm going to try taking a mix of gene sects for a bit of synergy and see kind of what I can do with different detachments in the same kind of list. I think this is going to be an interesting approach to look at, and I'm very interested in trying to find what synergies can be gained by mixing those gene sect detachments and what synergies and strategies can be made with some of these new characters on top of this, and finding out what does the cult look like with things like, say, more shooting elements added in, with things like acolytes being now the new ambush bomb that comes in, and getting them in there 3 inches, flaming the heck out of stuff. They have that strength 5 now. Things like that. What is it going to look like? This is what I'm going to be working on, but I would really like to know if you're looking at this and you're seeing something, or over time, if you're playing it and you find something that you think is going to work well. This channel has been sort of a common ground for cultists to meet and share ideas, helping the cult to be strong on the tables if we can do so. So over time, as we're all collectively playtesting this, let's try to come together and kind of share notes as we gain experience with this codex. I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments, or you can also join us over on the new Beernid Discord server if you're into that. I'll leave an invite link to that in the description in case you want to head over and join the disco. So that's it for today's video. I hope it kind of helps you gear up for the initial codex release, understand some of the changes, and start thinking of some of these things in advance. Yes, there are some good things and some things not so good in this codex, but we're going to try to make the best of it like we've done from the beginning. As always, I'd like to know your thoughts. Also, if you liked the video, found it helpful, something like that, go ahead, click that link and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you see something differently than I do, leave that in the comments for me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So that's it for today. This is Beernid 40K. Woo, Genestealer Codex coming out soon, less than a week to go. Have you made your pre-orders? Let me know about it. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Take care.